we'll get started. Very good of you to join us on a Monday evening. Delighted to have world silver medalist Hannah England. You saw one of the highlights of her career there from 2011, the World Championships. But Hannah's someone I've known since she was about 15. She came to train with the training group in Birmingham. And she's kind of reached the end of her career in the last year, but I think she's got a great story to tell, really, about her progression. So we're gonna touch on that this evening. I guess I'll share some slides together with Hannah there. So if we bear with me. So yeah, I guess. Look, one of the reasons why I've invited Hannah along really is she's made such a great progression really from being a 15, 16-year-old through to getting that global medal in at the age of 24. And I guess as a coach, if someone told you you could take a 16-year-old and then make the kind of progression you can see there on the graph of a 1500-meter time, you'd bite the hand off. So I think there's Hannah's going to talk around the progression of her career really in general, and then she will she's actually prepared some specifics on looking at training weeks for around this time of year at 2-year intervals, so you can really delve into some of the detail of that progression. Some of you sent excellent questions in, which we'll try and cover during the discussion, but if not, we'll pick up questions at the end. Also, if you have any questions that arise, put them in the chat option there. If they're relevant to what we're discussing, we see them at the time, we might pick it up then and then, but otherwise we'll pick them up and answer as many as we can at the end of the discussion. And Dara from marketing is recording the video, so he'll be there to share it afterwards. So if anyone's missed it or have to scribble things down too quickly or anything like that. So yeah, so I guess with that, I'll hand over to Hannah because I know she's got lots to talk about.
Cheers, Matt. Yeah, nice to see you, and thanks for having me along. Yeah, I would hope that anyone who's listening to us tonight could be inspired by that progression. I think obviously the Irish system is different from the English system, but for instance, I never won English schools. And that's a huge thing a huge deal that people see in the English system, that that's what you have to do as a junior to succeed as a senior, and that certainly wasn't my journey. I just enjoyed athletics at school and trained hard and trained reasonably well, but I wasn't a world beater. I wasn't a phenomenal teenager. I very much had that gradual progression through every stage of my career. And just like a bit more information for anyone out there that's not familiar with my story, I actually had the same coach from 14 until, well, I still call him my coach now, but till 33 when I retired. I had the same coach, Bud Baldaro, and I think that's a slightly different story than you see nowadays as well. You see, yeah, you see a lot of people having to move coaches to make that progression, and I'm incredibly proud of the work that Bud and I did together. And I think as we sort of talk about how my career unfolded, I think it's always brilliant that was done with the same coach, but we learned so much as an athlete and a coach together that we could both just grow, that benefited my career and a lot of the other girls that I trained alongside as well.
Okay, very good. So I don't know if you want to kick things off, Hannah, but maybe we're talking through in a little bit more detail around those your progression and I suppose the highlights along the way. So I think we can share that slide there with you.
Yeah, so as you see, yeah, so we've got this, if you, like your graph shows, if we ignore kind of 2015 onwards where it gets slower, up until that point, we've got a lovely big curve down to those really fast times. But yeah, like I said, so I didn't start off particularly fast. I think as sort of 4:28 is an under 17. There's lots of girls running a lot faster than that now, and there were a lot of girls running faster than that when I was that age. But that's all I was doing at 17, 18. And it was really nice to do this talk and dig out some of the training diaries and try and get a grasp on what I was doing at those ages as well. And as you can see, as Matt's put together in this table as well, it was very much sort of 20 miles a week until I got towards university. So 25, 30 miles a week just before I went to university. And then I managed 40, 45, 55, 55, 60 to 70, and then sort of topped out in that 65 to 75 miles a week. But you can see that took me best part of 8 years to get there. And it was a nice gradual progression. Another thing I touched on that I was quite proud of in my career was I never missed a summer season. As a junior or as a senior, I did a summer season every year. And I think that momentum and the cumulative training effect of that really, really helped me as well. And I think that's what I just hit from sort of 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I'd say. I had just a string of really consistent training and competition years, which just brought some really great race results as well.
Yeah, super. And I guess your college route, I guess we'll touch on, was a little bit different to some people in that you went to the NCAA in the third year of your undergrad course in Birmingham,
yes.
and then returned for the final year there. So that's a little bit different, and maybe we can talk through some of the issues around that at the later as we work through the years. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was really nice chunks of taking almost 5 seconds off a year for those from under 19 through to 22, which is unusual. It's very, very smooth progression. So hopefully we can touch on some of the reasons behind that. I guess consistency is one you've earmarked there, and that gradual progression. But I guess do you want to go straight to your training diary and use that as or do you want to? I suppose we can look at the end of your career as well. But maybe that's more relevant to come back to towards the end.
Oh, we could just forget about that, but I don't like that. I was going to say, I don't know, do you want me to touch on the college now? Do you think that's more relevant? Maybe set the scene before.
Yeah,
I we could say more about that.
Story, yeah.
Yeah, so I as a school kid, so 16, 17, 18, I was coached by Bud, but living in Oxford. So I did an awful lot of training on my own. I'd go up to visit the University of Birmingham group probably once a fortnight. To touch him with Bud, or I'd see him at races if I didn't make it up for training. But I was training on my own, and from talking to my Irish teammates, not that I'm Irish, but the girls that I train with, to Claire Tarpley and Sarah Tracy, which two of my biggest training partners, and to hear Sarah Tracy talk about what it's like to grow up in Ireland with sort of the sparse. Yeah, she didn't have training partners. She had to travel a long way to competition. I think I had it easier than she did, but I had that sort of vibe. I was training on my own as a teenager, which was hard because there's a lot more interesting things to do as a teenager than go on a run. But I did stay in the sport, luckily, which we could talk about as we go through. But I was training on my own, and at 18, I slightly entertained the idea of going to America. I'd lived there for a year when I was 10 and loved it, and I thought, oh, maybe I could do that. So I slightly looked into it, but it seemed a bit too scary, a bit too far away. And I was quite academically driven as well. So I just sort of got my head down, did my A-levels, tried to go to Oxford, didn't get in, and then went to Birmingham instead. But I kind of saw that still as a really good option, so I could be with Bud instead of coaching at a distance. So I could join the group that I'd been just dipping into and experiencing a little bit of. I could join that group and that team full time. I felt like that was a big enough difference to see if that could improve my running rather than needing to go further afield to the States. And it worked out really well. The course I did at Birmingham, I did biochemistry with a year in placement. As I came towards that year in placement, my boyfriend was in Florida and it was really sunny, and I thought, wow, well, if I could try and organise my year abroad to go to Florida. And I'd always wanted to experience the NCAA system, so I think it's phenomenal, the depth and competition they have out there. And I was just really fortunate that I sorted out my year in industry, to be a year abroad and to spend it at Florida State University. And that for me was, I was 21 and I was ready to train hard and ready to experience sort of that extreme environment. And then it brought out a lot in me. And I know you say gradual improvement, but to me, 412 to 406, that was a lot to take off in a year. I basically went out to the NCAAs going, the only thing that's available this year is the Olympics, so I've got nothing to lose. Yeah, screw it, I'll just go have fun, clown around in the sun. And nearly ended up making, that was Olympic A standard then, so nearly ended up making the Beijing Olympics, and kind of gave myself a springboard for a professional career. So that was really brilliant. And then I had to come back and do my final year of university with all the academic demands of that before I could really sort of crack on as a full-time athlete. But that was my choice and my journey through the college time.
Yeah, I guess normally you're getting down to the realms of diminishing returns there, where you're working harder to make a smaller difference, really. So it's one thing to knock 5 seconds off, or to go from 2:26 to 2:20, or 6 seconds. It's another when you starting to get towards the sharp end there. So yeah, it was a good improvement. So yeah, I guess we'll start at the beginning and look at what you were doing back when you were still in school. So this was age 16, and you went to the European Youth Olympics that year.
Yes, I think I don't really know why, but I've always kept meticulous training diaries. I'm quite a planner, so I found it. When Matt asked me to have a look back, I knew there'd be something, but I was actually quite pleasantly surprised by the level of detail there was in there, which hopefully will be interesting to any of you guys out there that are either working with athletes at this age, or if you're that age yourself. So I'll read it through just in case it's too blurry for you, but as sort of highlighted in the green, you can see the 3 sessions: so a track session, a grass session, and a trail session. These would have been done on my own. Like I said, I was in Oxford on my own. So if we start from the Monday, it's got a 30 to 20 minute recovery run. It then has a ball at Freud's nightclub till 1 a.m, which was running was big to me as a teenager, but I was also incredibly social. And as I've noted on the side there, I was really, really into my ballet as well. I was doing that 4 or 5 times a week. I was pretty academically ambitious. So while running was important to me, it was very much a part of the rest of my life, not sort of an overall focus. But so yeah, less about the ball on the Monday night, but I still came back and did 10 by 300 off a 200 jog. Looks like they're ranging between about 53 and 55. So that's a nice sort of just decent session to be doing in January. I imagine I was on the track because it's pretty boring going around grass on your own the whole time. And then I did a 20-minute run, and it looks like I skipped my circuit training that day. I haven't given an excuse, but I was meant to be doing 1 set of circuits a week as well then. And then on the next day, I've got a 15-minute fartleks. That would be unstructured sort of sprint between very much the stereotypical sprint between the lampposts kind of job. Again, down, that would be in the grass around the outside of the track. Then I had a rest day. Decided to note that I didn't go out, because that was a big deal there, that I didn't go out, and I did a session the next day that was 3 by 3 minutes, again just around a trail around a park, and then finishing off with 30 minutes on the Sunday. So that was my longest run, was 30 minutes. And I think just guessing, sort of, I don't really know what pace I was running because Garmin's didn't exist when I was 16, but my guess would be it was 20 miles tops. And this week culminated with a second place. The next week culminated with a second place at the UK Cross Challenge, which is pretty good. So yeah, that was the sort of training that was getting me to the European Youth Olympics and to second place at the Cross Challenge. Yeah,
so you were running some cross country, I guess. For to translate that, where you say you didn't do the Oregon, that would be an Oregon Trail, which would be a circuit session based on where you'd run between the exercises normally.
Yes, so this is why I need you, Matt, isn't it? Because you're the only one that understands Birmingham lingo. You're gonna know what. So Oregon is something Bud really, really loved. So you do. I think if you Google Oregon circuit, it does come up. Who was the guy? Who's the? Oh, I can't remember.
It was the Andromeda. It was Santa Cruz or someone.
Yeah. One of those guys. So you do an exercise for 30 seconds, run 100 meters in 20 seconds, and then have a 10-second recovery before starting the next exercise. So it's 30-second rotations of an exercise or a 100-meter run. Just felt it's really, really. It's actually the thing that I still do now. because I think it's just all over like good body conditioning, and I don't want to go in the gym this year and get COVID. So I think it's really brilliant. Yeah, I do that once a week. 16, 17, 18, that was my conditioning work.
Yeah, very good. And I guess the other nice thing we'll see again as you go through is those handwritten training diaries, pre-Garmin Connect, etc., and other Strava and the other brands available. Actually, sometimes you've got more detail in those than what you get as a coach now from athletes, where you get a GPS file and heart rate file and very little else.
Yeah, and you can see even
like comments there are interesting. Even as you mentioned, the fact that it was significant that you stayed in on the Saturday night tells a tale.
Yeah, but it was also, I think, if you look towards the Monday on this week as well, the P up there, that'll mean I was on my period.
Okay,
so that will be tracked as well. And this was before, I don't know, maybe Bud did ask me and I can't remember him asking me to put that in. But for whatever reason, I've always taken a lot of confidence and sort of enjoyment in that detail. And like you say, it escalates. It just gets more and more detail.
Yeah, and I guess for young athletes the handwritten diary is great and very simple. But even if you're using a GPS watch and storing your information there, all that information can still go in there, and it is valuable to look back on and reflect on. It's context means a lot, and I guess one of the normal health warnings with a talk like this is people look at Hannah England, world medalist, and say, "Oh, she did this session. I'll do this session," because and just copy straight off. But I think context is important. So both recording your own training and when you're analysing what other people have done. So a lot to be said for a good training diary.
This is whizzing forward to the first year at university, where it looks like I maybe didn't have as much time for all that detail, for more time socialising. But yeah, so as you can see, I've noted up at the top of the page. So this year I went to the World Junior Champs. I didn't make it out the heats. I had food poisoning. I think I was probably a little bit better than 4:17, but not much. Went to the World Junior Champs. I was still doing ballet once a week, because I really enjoyed that, and I wanted to do it at university as well. And then I added in strength and conditioning training once a week, and that would be more the traditional Olympic lifts, so squats, cleans, step ups, and then throw in some, I think I'd do circuits. So you can see on Wednesday the 30th there's a circuits in there as well. So I think I would normally do one lot of weights and one lot of circuits a week. This was off the back of Liverpool, so I think I only did one. Strength and conditioning. The European cross trials. Yeah. So
for Liverpool is the UK cross trial, which takes place the same time as our national cross country normally is held there at the end of November. So to give you some context. Yeah. So that maybe relates to why you're going out as well. You hadn't.
Yes. Yeah. So as you can see, so Matt tasked me with finding the same week every year, which I couldn't quite do, just to do with there's some years where I was just totally injured or totally ill that week, so I tried to find a decent snapshot. But as you can see, this one still involves a social life on the Wednesday and Thursday. That was probably exacerbated because we had the big race of the season the week before. Birmingham was all about kind of working very hard, training very hard until that big pinnacle, and then enjoying a good couple of weeks after that, where you could be a bit more sociable and catch up with your friends that didn't go running and that sort of thing. So at this stage, by now I would be doing, we'd hit the grass all winter. That was sort of what we did. It was very unscientific. Like I couldn't, so the session on the Saturday appears to be 1200, 800, 600, 400, which is very unusual for that to be marked out on grass. Normally we would just be doing a lap of the park. We'd have a decent idea of what a good time for that park was. But it wasn't very scientific. It was more on effort and just, I was very lucky. From the moment I got to University of Birmingham, I had an incredibly high quality group around me, whether that be women or as I progressed through the group, I would then have men to run with instead. So it was all just about having the quality group around me, and then it didn't really matter where we were running and what pace we were running. It was more about just getting the effort in and running with the group. as you can see, I think what I brought in, as I said, there was two lots of strength and conditioning training by this point, with the circuits and the weights, but also on the Sundays drills. Come to University of Birmingham, drills became a big part of my week as well. And we do a lot. We do a big old specific drill session on a Sunday night, but that will be splattered through the week as well in terms of the warm up, and just starting that out of the gym conditioning work as well.
Yeah, and I guess maybe we'll when we start look later through your diaries and see some of your heart rates and where you're working to heart rate, we'll probably it might put a bit of context on how you'll maybe be able to get away with running without too much specific, seemingly without too much specificity at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
You probably had quite a good perception of your own intensity and feel for runs. Apparent, I think, when we look at some of your later diaries.
Well, I was very lucky. I learned from the guys that you were at uni with. Yeah, I was lucky. I was coming up here training with them from 16 and learning how to train, learning how to do a jog recovery, learning how to pace a big session. And I think that set a really brilliant foundation that I was then, when all the technology came in, it was almost like, oh, that's interesting. I'll see. It was almost just checking what I was doing anyway, checking it against a VO2 max test, testing it against my heart rate. The technology gave me an insight into how the training worked for me rather than guiding the training, which, yeah, I think was down to a big group and Bud's reluctance to sort of adopt any science. It wasn't really his thing.
Yeah, I'm maybe not. It doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So I think it's a key skill, being able to make that judgment without the technology as well. So that's interesting. So things are progressing here, and any big learnings from the World Juniors at that stage, going to that championship?
It massively opened my eyes that I was not as professional as some of the other people on that British team. I thought I worked hard. I trained very hard that year, and I performed well. I made the qualify. I think I won the trial, but I was on the team with Steph Twell, who I think came 8th in the final, was devastated. And I sat there going, what? Like, that's amazing. But that wasn't enough for her. She'd gone there to try and get a medal. And it was over in Beijing, this championship. So we had a holding camp. And it really showed me that I wasn't operating at the level of, Steph's younger than me. So I sort of got out there and was like, wow, I've got a big jump in professionalism if I'm expecting to run what she's running. I guess I sort of saw results on the internet or in AW, Athletics Weekly, and couldn't relate to them. And then I could join up those dots on this training camp and sort of really see the attitude on and off the track that the rest of my teammates had. I'd say I was slightly below average in professionalism. It wasn't awful, but it was a nice sort of eye opener to have a look at how I could get better. Other than that, it was a baptism of fire. The race in itself was, it was awful. There was no way I was ready for that. The level of physicality, the tactical. I probably, if I'd run 4:17, I would have made it through. But I did that once in an even-paced race. I wasn't ready for that sort of erratic pace and championship racing.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting and good lessons to take away. And okay, well, maybe we'll come back to whether you think it was a good or bad thing that you won as a professional at that age. As we get towards the end of your story, but yeah, definitely good to see the progression there. Moving on, this is would have been your 3rd year in college. By this stage, you've managed to arrange to go to the NCAA. Maybe there's a lot of athletes there looking at, I guess, university choices and university pathways over the next year or two. Do you want to explain a little bit about some of the mechanics of that? How that came about and how you were able to do that?
Yeah, so once I decided that I was going to take a year out of my biochemistry degree, it was a sandwich year, so it wasn't a total year off. I still had academic criteria to hit in that year to satisfy my course in Birmingham. So I decided I was going to give America a go. I looked at Stanford, Oregon, and Florida State University because they were already Brits there. and Stanford and Oregon weren't that interested. They weren't committed to giving me the scholarship. I think we worked it out. I would have to find about 25 grand a year to go to Oregon or Stanford. So, well, my dad's a professor at Oxford University, and he was like, "Oh, you're not going to Florida State. You're going to Stanford. You're going to somewhere like that." And then once I came back to him and said it was going to cost 25 grand, he said, "No, go where you want." So it was, I didn't go on an official visit. So you can do official visits out to the American colleges where they can sort of show off their facilities and give you a chance. Well, they want to show off their facilities. I think it's important for the athletes to get a feel for the environment, for the team, for the coach, and whether it's the right fit for them. But I'd already gone out on a training camp the year before, just used it as a base for an Easter training camp, and knew that I loved the place and that it had good women to run with. But yeah, so it was a pretty easy choice. And as I touched on at the start, I spoke to Bud about it, and we kind of went, I've got nothing to lose. There's no under 23 champs this year. There's no world universities. There's nothing like that. There is only the Olympic Games. Just go, experiment, have fun, and see what happens. So I went out there and I was sending Bud the training. I got the training ahead of time. The coach spoke to Bud before I went out. She asked me to bring my training diaries with me. She was very pleased by the detail. She asked me to bring my training diaries with me so she could see what I was already doing. And that was that sort of 45 miles a week. So she was like, right, we'll keep you on 50, 55 miles a week. Spoke to Bud, had an idea of what had worked for me already. And then I would send Bud an email at the end of every week saying, this is what I've done, this is what's coming up. And I think it genuinely took Bud a month to go, just crack on. It looks brilliant. He's like, that looks absolutely perfect. You should just go get your head down and do what this lady's telling you to do, because it looks great. So that was really lovely to have that. I feel that's very important. If you're going to go to any group, whether it's domestic or international, I think you get a lot more out of it if you immerse yourself in it. And that was definitely a big part for me, that I could just go there and just totally buy into the program. And I was running with a lady called Susan Crummins now. She runs for Holland. She was Susan Kuiken then. She was way better than me. She'd beaten me at under 23s the year before. And Barbara Parker, who still holds the British record for the steeplechase. So I was running with really, really quality athletes. It brought me on a lot. That the mileage didn't increase that much. I went up to 2 lots of S&C a week, increased the mileage a little bit, actually decreased the sessions, went down to 2 sessions a week, but with a lot more running around it. But I think it was the intensity of the sessions came up a notch. As you can see, I've put the session I put as an example, the 3-mile tempo, averaging whatever it was, 5:37, 3 minutes off, and then a mile in 5:06. Like that, I think that's pretty high quality. That was not a sort of session I would have been capable of doing before I went out there. So we really brought on the quality in the sessions. And I did a full cross country season there, on 6K lovely manicured golf courses. And again, I think that really, the 6K 20-minute doing that cross country race through the whole of the autumn, that really brought on my aerobic fitness as well. And when that was piled on top of the decent couple of years I had at Birmingham, I think it really sort of unleashed. I think I went undefeated. I think I was beaten by 1 professional athlete all season. I wasn't beaten by any of the collegiate athletes in any of the races I did, indoors or outdoors. I won NCAA indoors and NCAA outdoors. So it was definitely like a massive step up. Yeah, a massive step up in performance when I was there.
Yeah, I guess Stanford and Oregon were kicking themselves ready when you won the NCAAs.
I hope they were.
But I guess I suppose that's October when you're in cross country season. There's a lot of aerobic work there, really, with that, aside from that hard mile. Was that typical for how did you transition into track in those years? You ran an NCAA indoor season, which you won the mile.
Sorry, go. I interrupted you.
So yeah, I was just going to ask when did you phase in more race specific work in that year?
I think this was the first example for me personally of having speed from strength. I think I'd really come at it because I think Bud was purposely developing me quite slowly. I'd come at it from sort of a speed and the short track sessions, come at it maybe from that point of view. Was I remember doing a 200 at some point. It must have been just when we got back after Christmas, when I carried on doing this kind of work through Christmas, and I ran a PB at the end of a session. It was only 27. I didn't have the wheels that some people have. But yeah, I remember running a PB in training before the indoor season started. I think it was enabled by, I think that shift into indoors was enabled by a lot of strides. So you can see where have I got them on the Thursday. I remember at least twice a week there'd be strides. And then I took that drill session on the Sunday, where it's done on the Saturday there after the long run. I brought that from Birmingham with me as well. So I'd kept a lot of drills and that sort of thing. That's something I did throughout my career, always try and keep in touch with the drills and the strides. So I think if you're in touch with that, you can kind of morph yourself into any season pretty easily. Yeah.
And were the strides cruising strides, or was it 30 meters flat out in those sort of?
Cruising, yeah, just sort of 80 meters, probably at 800 meter pace, maybe a touch under.
Yeah,
fairly relaxed.
And I guess, what was your so did you have, like, lots of people go to the NCAA, some people have challenges when they get there and it doesn't really work out. Others, it's the transition back when they get back they struggle with. How was you seemingly had a great year and it was seamless. How do you think, why did it work for you? And are there any key tips there for anyone going to the NCAA?
Sarah Tracy and me were discussing on our hill session on Saturday. This is this year, our very, very old girls hill session. I think getting there, I found it, I was way more homesick than I thought I'd be getting there. Because to say I was 21, I'd already done 2 years in Birmingham. I didn't even think that was really going to be a factor. I was incredibly homesick, and that's saying that there were a lot of other Brits there. There were a lot of Europeans. I found that really hard. I was lucky that I didn't get injured or anything like that. I don't know how I would have felt if I'd got injured, and that so athletically everything was going very well. Coming back was hard as well. You go from it genuinely is as close as you can get to being a professional athlete without having a shoe contract. You get all your gear, you got free physio, all the facilities you could ask for. You're getting flown to races. This is if you go to a big college, flown to races every weekend. And so, turning back up in the UK off the back of that, it does feel hard. And that's the thing, I only went for a year. I think so it was quite easy to adjust in and adjust out. But I feel like if I'd gone any longer, it would have felt more of a chasm coming back. And I know Luke, my husband, did 3 years at Florida, and he really struggled coming back. Just the loss of the teammates, the loss of that environment, and just sort of having to start again yourself, I think can be really. I think it's, people talk about transitions in sport and the different ages and going through the age groups, but I think coming back from the NCAA system is a huge transition. It's
we've got some athletes who've done very well over there now and in the final year or two. Is there any tips you'd have, like coming back to make that transition back work?
I think it'd be really take in the environment. If you're in an environment that's working for you, really try and figure out why it's working for you and bring as much of that home as you can. So there were loads of sort of physical elements of the program I did in Florida that suited my body amazingly. So I'd come back and do them on my own, and that's for you. It's easy when you've got a coach nagging you to do them. But I knew they were what had made me better. So I sort of worked on bringing along my teammates in Birmingham with that. So I sort of said, hey, come on, let's go and do this extra thing I learned in Florida, and just really tried to bring people along with my journey. I think it's accepting that it's going to be harder, that you're going to get back, and there will be, especially you think of the time of year as well, you come back in the autumn, it's always hard. It's always hard going back into that winter training and stuff. I think it's just sort of accepting that it is going to be hard and just trying to ride that out and make it better where you can, whether that's finding people to train with to create that team atmosphere, or just trying to replicate what worked for you, but accept that mentally it might be a bit tougher.
Yeah, two really good bits of advice there. And in terms of going out there, you were kind of saying you thought you would have struggled to do it at 18 because of how homesick you were and where you were at physically. Were there any tips around someone going out there?
I think the other thing that I knew by 2021 was, like, I knew how to train. I think before university, as I sort of showed, I was training, but I wasn't training seriously. And I needed that extra 2 years of like athletic maturation to cope with what was going to be expected of me in the NCAA system. I think obviously it's possible to go out at 18. You've seen people do really well. Like Kieran O'Leonard, he was at FSU, he went to Michigan first and then FSU as well. He had a mixed bag, but came out of it, by the time he finished, he'd mastered it. So I think you can go at 18 and be successful, but I think it's hard. Yeah, I don't know what I'd do if someone did want to go out at 18. I think it's the same as I'd say to any 18-year-old going to university, like, it's going to be tough. You're not going to, there's going to be tough periods. You're going to have to ride them out and sort of try and stick at it to come out the other side of it, really. And I think I just found it easier to go through that really sort of tough learning curve of being away from home in the UK. Because I was only, if it all went horribly wrong, I was only an hour and a half away from my parents. And I could just, go back, recover a bit and try again. Because I think if you're all the way over in America, I think that's harder to sort of survive all that.
Yeah, I think part of it, as with a lot of things in athletics, is knowing yourself as an individual and working out what's going to work for you. And what journey is going to work for you. So you did that very well, and I guess it's tricky to do when you're 18 to do 17 to do the research and really dig deep about what's going to work for you. But it is necessary, I think. So yeah,
no, it's tough. It's tough being 17.
So that was super though. So you came back a double NCAA champion, and this is at the age of 21. So then you moved on, and this is first year as a pro. So you must be about 23 now, and this is your year you graduate from Birmingham, was it? Or
so this is just after. I would have just finished the summer before. So like you said, winning NCAA's indoors and outdoors got me a kit contract. Which I didn't really know existed before I went to Florida. It's much different now because it's all splashed over social media the whole time, but I didn't really know you could be a full-time athlete and you could get sponsored like that. So I left Florida, got a kit contract, got on British Athletics funding as well, but I had a final year of university to complete, so I didn't actually access any of the stuff from British Athletics. I was too busy trying to do my finals, trying to make world champs. That was very much my focus. I didn't make world champs. It was a bit of a shame. But so my final year at university was very hard work, academically and physically. So then this December when we come here, this is my first autumn as a pro, as a full-time athlete. I weighed up the idea of doing a PhD. I always thought that's what I thought. I would do a PhD to enable me to run for another 3 years. That was always sort of my half-life plan. And then
you saw me and said that was a bad idea.
I just saw you get tighter and tighter every year and thought, I don't want one of them. But it was I was lucky that I had the kit contract that meant it was financially feasible to be a full-time athlete. I think that's often a tough choice for athletes, whether they what to do with their time, how to balance training and employment after university. And I was just super, super lucky that it wasn't really a choice. This year I volunteered in a PhD lab because I knew I needed something outside of athletics. You can only train so many hours of a day. I knew I still needed something to sort of distract me between that. So almost the best of both worlds. Got to go and play around in a PhD lab with none of the writing and none of the planning. And then I could focus more than enough energy on training. One thing I got really wrong in my first year as a pro, which I think would be very similar to coming back from the NCAA system, is that my time management was just out the window. This looks like an all right week, to be fair, but there were a lot of weeks where
the first thing that strikes me is the lines are a lot more full than they were.
Yes, there's a lot of training. All I know is I spent a lot of time running in the dark this year because I didn't get up early enough to leave the gap between the double runs. I'd oversleep and then not be able to do my second run in the daylight, which is pretty stupid if you're a full-time athlete. You should definitely be able to do 2 runs in the daylight. But yeah, by this point I was still training with Bud. I really entertained the idea of moving to Loughborough University at this point to get coached by George Gandy, who's just passed away this year. But George's athlete, Lisa Zabriskie, had just got a silver medal at the World Champs that year. And I was finishing university and I thought, right, it's time to make that next stage, go to that next best environment to improve myself. But I think it was 3 weeks after my finals, I ran 1:59. I kind of thought, right, okay, maybe I don't need to go. Yeah, maybe Bud knows me better than, maybe I don't need to change that setup. So I made the decision to stay in Birmingham. It was a big decision. That was a really well thought out. Like we sort of say, every time I've changed environment, I've thought a lot about it, and that was a big decision not to change my environment. But yeah, so at this point I was up to sort of 55, 60 miles a week. 3 S&C sessions, so I do 2 lots of weights and 1 lots of circuits. What's that what it says on this week? Yes, I've got circuits and I've got weights on the Monday, circuits on Wednesday, weights on the Friday. So that was a big part of my program, that strength and conditioning. And yeah, the steady running on the Monday, that was quite a big, I don't know how everyone's running's different, but to me that was quite a big deal to get under that sort of, I think there's 4 miles there under 6:30 miling. Sort of getting faster. There was a bit of a block there with a steady state. But then the rest of it isn't really, back to what I sort of said about not being that scientific. We're just running around a grass field with a high quality training group. Building aerobic base.
Yeah. And I guess the hazard with that is some people would tend to go too hard. So do you think you must have seen that with teammates that had a tendency to be brilliant in training and pushing it, but then didn't convert it to races?
I think you see that. Is that, yeah. I think I was always, so we did big volume at this stage. I was doing big volume grass sessions. So I guess I was always sort of going with the mentality of like, if I can survive this, that's all. Yeah, it wasn't. I was always out of my depth, so I think that always allowed me to. I always knew it wasn't my forte. Like, give me a track session, then I'm not letting a single person pass me. It's like, give me a big old grass session like this as an 8:15 runner. I wouldn't go through the motions. I would apply myself. It would still be very hard work, but it was more about. And by this stage as well, I was very aware that there were a lot of training components in the week that all needed to be good. I remember talking to one of my mates about it. It's like, you can't be a queen of the weights room and a queen of Netchley. That was their favourite grass field. Matt knows where it is. Brilliant grass field. But, I sort of had this awareness that I couldn't win at everything. I couldn't win the long run and then still expect to pull off a good hill session. I couldn't master. I had to conduct myself in a way that allowed all the different training elements to be of high quality. Rather than sort of peaking and then spending a week to recover and not getting anything else done.
Yeah, which I guess is, you talk about the not being too scientific, but that's largely what we use things like heart rate for, is to monitor the intensity and make sure we're not going to the well the whole time. And you were kind of doing that intrinsically anyway. So you dropped your time to 4:04 this year, and would you still attribute that to improved strength, or was the big changes in your race specific work as well?
I would say that I generally think, I know it sounds like a cop out, but a little bit of everything. It was just that slight improvement in mileage. The weights were heavier, sessions were a tiny bit longer, the track sessions were a tiny bit faster. I think it was just a nice sort of culmination of building on the year before as well. And as being a pro as well, like I was exposed to loads of different races. I was in better races and in faster races as well. The 4:06, I won in 4:06. So yeah, you need to be in a race that's won in 4 minutes and getting pulled around to a 4:04. So that had a lot to do with it.
So winning the NCAA has opened doors for you in that sense as well.
Massively, absolutely massively, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I guess there's lots of questions that we might be coming in around this. We'll go through. So this is your year, 2011. and the World Championships was at the end of this year. So again, the riding seems to be getting smaller because there's more to squash in there. And straight away at the top of the page, we see Kenya and big riding. So this is a bit of a change in routine for you.
Yeah, so we introduced altitude training. I think I did my first altitude camp in 2010, just because I'd met some nice American girls on the circuit, and they invited me to go out to Mammoth Lakes to train with them in California. So yeah, that sort of started me experimenting with altitude training. And I never quite got to the bottom of whether it worked that well for me. I don't, I'm physiologically speaking, like from my blood test results, I'm a non-responder. I don't make any extra red blood cells. My hemoglobin doesn't increase at altitude. So some people, they go to altitude and it's hard for 5 days and then it gets easier. Whereas for me, it just stays hard for the whole month, which was minging, but it got me very fit. So yeah, we did use a lot of altitude, but Kenya was partly just because of the weather as well. You'd have really, really good weather through the winter, high altitude and good weather and no distractions. So I did use it a lot through 2011, 12, 13, 14. So this, like what I've picked out here, I know there's obviously that temptation when you're sharing your journals to pick out the best week. But this is a phenomenal week. 76, I think the highest I've ever hit was 78. So this is a big week of training, and it has a lot of different components in it. I don't know, whether the quality is good enough for everyone to see, but there was, 2 weight sessions, 1 circuit, 3 sessions, like 3 high intensity sessions. I'd be doing drills on the days that I wasn't doing the sessions. There was an awful lot going on. But this was very representative of what I would achieve on a camp. And for the peak of my career, I'd be on a camp for a month and then I'd come home, maybe compete, maybe just come home for Christmas. And then I'd go back out on another camp. So I was putting a lot of weeks back to back like this. But this program took Bud and I probably 4 years, probably from FSU to here. So that's 3 years. But it was a real refinement of what does my body respond to, what can my body tolerate, and what do we think is going to push it on to the next level. And I was really, really big on the S&C, on the circuits and stretching, on yoga, on drills and everything like that to make a robust body that could cope with this level of training. But yeah, it was I can't believe I could do it when I look back. It's really high intensity. And I think I had sort of the attitude that I wanted to do all these different elements, a bit kind of stubborn. Like I'd always want to keep them all in. So to do that, I had to be very, very diligent with my off-track conditioning and rehab and all that sort of stuff. So this is peak senior athletics. I don't think it would have been very sustainable for more than, it was only sustainable for 3 or 4 years, but it was good while it lasted.
Yeah, and those heart rates there, the little heart is average heart rate, and then the arrow is peak.
Yeah.
And he was saying actually, although you tended to run to feel afterward, but they did run reasonably well to your training zones set by Treadmill Test.
Yes, absolutely. So I did, like I sort of touched on before, I think Bud as well. I think I was telling Matt a story when we were prepping for this. We spent 2 weeks out in Oregon with Alberto Salazar. He was very welcoming. I didn't see anything untoward, and he was incredibly generous with his time. And I was, but the setup there is so scientific. Everything was very controlled. Everything was very measured. And I was doing my first session back after the Olympics, and it was just like 4 by 5 minutes. And me and Bud were like, "Oh, we'll just go run around this grass field." And one of the assistant coaches was like, "Oh no, I'll get you a wheel, Bud. I'll get you a wheel and some cones." And Bud was looking at him like, "It's all right. She's just going to go run around the outside of grass field." And they were trying to persuade Bud to measure out 200 meters so he could tell how fast I was doing these 5-minute reps. And you could just see it was just against like every grain in Bud's body. Bud's just like, no, she's going to go run 4 by 5 minutes. And I think science is brilliant, and I think it has helped us learn so much about running. But I like to see it applied to experience. I kind of think you've got someone like Bud that's coached for decades without any of that and got results. I almost see it as a way to complement and refine something rather than drive it. And like you say, Matt, like I think I'm lucky that I had good training partners and that I had an environment where I could learn my own body without sort of having to come from the other angle. But we did do treadmill testing. I hated it. It was like I loathed it. I was so nervous for it, and I just didn't bring a lot out of me. Being in a lab on my own on a treadmill was my worst nightmare. I'd far rather be out in a park or on a track. But we did do it, and we did have the results. But I would very much do a run, check my heart rate afterwards. And if it was wildly out what it would have been, I would have seen that as an indicator of illness or an indicator of overtraining. And I would have responded to that, but I would never have run along looking at my watch and responding to what was on the watch. It was a bit more sort of instinctual than that.
Yeah.
But I love detail, so I'd write it all down.
Yeah. And it's not that Bud wouldn't advocate varying intensity and doing a lot of work, so maximum work, as he would say. So yeah, it was interesting balance between science and feel. So I guess maybe we'll stop sharing, and you can talk us through, or maybe look at what questions we've got, but you might talk us through the run into that the actual world champs in 2011.
Mm-hmm. So I think I put it on the injury on it. So 2000.
Yeah, I have that slide if you want it, but maybe it's as easy to talk through it.
Yeah. No, I think it was interesting. We were talking. I think one question that someone had sent in was about injuries, and especially to get further away from something you like to forget. But I was actually very injured in 2011. I'd done the European Indoor Champs. I think I'd run 4.7 indoors, so I went to European Indoor Champs ranked third, thinking, oh yeah, like this is it. I've arrived as a senior athlete. I'm going to boss the European Indoor Champs. Went out in the heats on my birthday, and was really, really gutted and massively overtrained to try and compensate for that. I was just really peed off. It was a sort of second year as a pro, third year as a pro, and I'd had that really good ranking going into a championship, and just thought that's it, it's going to happen. So I overtrained through March and April, trying to sort of train away that disappointment. Totally screwed up my Achilles, missed 5 weeks, so I missed all of May, and I actually, my first race back at Cork, which was a nice one, but yeah, I missed 5 weeks and just had to try and replicate all of my training on Aqua jogging and on the bike. But that was something I kind of knew how to do anyway. I'd had a bit of education from the On Camp with Kelly scheme, the Kelly Holmes ran an educational scheme. So I had some knowledge about cross training, but that was a really sort of crunch time where I had to apply it. So Bud and I worked really, really hard to figure out a cross training regime that worked for me. So I missed all of May, opened up at Cork, I think on about the 10th of June in a 4:10, and then ran a 4:1 PB 4 weeks after that. Which I think was just, that really showed to me that cross training really, really worked for me as an athlete, especially in a 1500 meter event. So yeah, it's kind of, you go from writing off the season thinking you're not going to have it. I think that's probably why Dogi was such a surprise, and probably I went into it so relaxed, because I genuinely was happy to be there. I spent 5 weeks injured going, if I get any races this year, that I am not going to screw these up, getting nervous or not committing. I'm sort of really lucky to get a season out of it at all, let alone silver medal. So it was good.
So how did you? Can you remember any details of how you structured that cross training? Were you in the pool every day, or did you mix it up, or how did you make it work for you?
Yeah, so I do remember, because I did a lot of planning for it. I would up it to 4 sessions a week. So that would be probably 3 aqua jogging sessions, 1 bike session. And for me, that those would always, Bud was really, really good at setting aqua jogging sessions. So we had a very sort of fixed formula that you do 30 minutes worth of reps off very short recovery. you wouldn't really have more than 15 or 20 seconds. Yeah, I don't know how injured. I'll give you my favourite aqua jogging session in case there's anyone injured out there that needs an aqua jogging session. Do 5 by 2 minutes off 15 seconds, 10 by a minute off 10 seconds, and 20 by 30 seconds off 5 seconds. So that'd be the sort of that's always my bog standard aqua jogging session. And then I'd do 3 of them and a bike session. I'm probably going to say more days in the week than they are, and then supplement the rest with biking. I found the cross trainers all right, but to be honest, most of my injuries weren't really appropriate to be, I wasn't appropriate to be on, it was usually lower leg, so it wasn't really appropriate to be on a cross trainer, so I just sit on the bike and hammer that. We used to work on a formula that if it took me an hour to run 8 miles, I would use about that ratio for cross training. So yeah, if I was never quite hit 80 miles a week, but if I was an 80 mile a week athlete, I would try and achieve 10 hours of cross training. And that helped me. I think when you're cross training, you don't get the same feedback mentally or physically than you do when you're running. When you're running, you're logging those miles, you're running out with your mates. It's really hard to get it's really hard to know that you're doing enough, or know when you're doing too much. So that was something my group always did. We'd log it by hours of cross training, and I'd find that useful if I was coming back from running as well. So okay, I'm up to running 20 miles, but I still need to do this many hours to match what I would normally be doing. So that worked well for me, but I would adjust that if it was crunch time in a track season, I would stick to that. But if it was in the winter and I felt that I would back off the training to allow an injury to heal. I think that's important as well. I think you see people get injured and stay injured because they haven't actually given their body the energy or the time to recover. So yeah, the getting injured in May was sort of like, go get your head down and reap the rewards of all the training you've done that year, and you've got the time constraints of a track season looming. I had that even worse in 2012 and got injured the end of May, and I had 6 weeks or 7 weeks to the Olympics. That doesn't, whatever the dates was, I hadn't had about 7 weeks from getting injured to the Olympics. So again, that was sort of, more prioritize at least maintaining fitness. Which is just hard work. But in the winter, I'd be more like just back off and let the injury heal so I could get back training.
And I guess, did it take you a while to get used to competing at major championships and getting a feel for being competitive, or was it something that just came naturally to you? I know that your last lap there in Daegu there was interesting, like if people want to watch it back, actually, just the patience, if you're watching, you're kind of itching for Hannah to make a move at some stage earlier, and you just sit there. But did you learn a lot and evolve as a championship competitor, or was it always something that was there by instinct?
I think I did have good instinctual tactics. I think in the start of my professional career, so sort of 2009, 2010, they would get utterly polluted by nerves. I would throw races because I was just too nervous to relax and let it be instinctual. And it came 4th and 5th at the Commonwealth Games in Delhi, when there were girls that I'd beaten the whole time. It was a couple of girls that I'd run with growing up that got medals. That was a real sort of kick in the teeth, and I was like, right, I had the physical capability to do that, but nerves and a bad mental state stopped that. So I worked with a sports psychologist after that, and we didn't really work on tactics. It was more about getting myself in a state that I could relax and concentrate on a race instead of being distracted by, if this happens, if I screw this up, I'm not going to that chance. If I don't, all that noise that can happen around performances. I developed tactics to just be able to ignore that and focus on the race. And I think
what worked for you there on that specific? Is there anything specifically that worked for you in cutting out that noise?
Yeah, I think I was very chuffed that I was the only Brit that made that final. That took a lot of pressure off me, that I was then the most high performing British athlete. Lisa Dubowski got knocked out in the semis. So I went into that, I felt like I'd already succeeded. So I didn't feel pressure. But I think specifically that last 100 or that last 50 was something I practiced all year in training. I had a male training partner that year who sort of sacrificed his year to help me. And we would have an absolute sprint to the death in the last 50 of every big track session. And that became that ability to perform, that ability to deliver a sprint finish under pressure had been practiced. And yeah, we'd practiced that, I don't know, 20 times that summer. And I think, yeah, that was what absolutely came through there. Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, I think it was, I went into autopilot, and I couldn't, because I wasn't thinking I'm running for a medal, I've got all this pressure. I was just went to autopilot, like, oh, it's last 50 meters of a rep, hammer it. So I think, yeah, long answer, but once I had the mental strategies to relax and enable that to come out, then I could sort of finish a race like that.
Yeah, and I suppose we're picking up a few of the question areas on, I suppose, psychology was one, and that was good. And then you had around injuries, you were saying you were pretty blessed, really, in that you didn't get injured very much early on in your career. It was really tend to be illness more than injury, and I guess that was one of the keys to that progression. But then 2012, you got spiked badly on your Achilles, and did it get infected, or it was a problem around that, stemmed from that? And that must have been, you were kind of one of the favourites for 2012, I guess, for home Olympics. Yeah. That must have been a real mental challenge there. Yeah,
that absolutely sucked. Like, it's just, yeah, that was a disaster. I think it was I trained phenomenally all year. When you see that training diary with all those different elements in there, like, Bud and I put so much effort into how much training can we do without getting injured, with this being sustainable. And we'd absolutely nailed that. I went to Hengelo, which is still quite a big race on the circuit. And got spiked in the back of my Achilles with 300 meters in. And I remember slowing down a second and then going, that's awful. I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to run after this race. I remember thinking that, and then thinking, well, like, we'll just race. And I won it. It was one of the biggest races I'd won up to that point. I won, and then I think I tried to jog, couldn't, like, literally tried to get off the track, and I was like, oh, I can't do that. Lay on the physio bed. I managed to get straight to the physio bed, and I was like, yeah, I can't flex my ankle. And the physio, she didn't tell me till the next year, but you could see my Achilles. I flex my foot. She was just like, okay, don't do that. And I was like, okay. But yeah, so it literally had someone had put their spike. It was like 3 millimeters deep, 7 millimeters long, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot in the middle of your Achilles. And I got flown straight home. And I think I spent like 12 hours in my flat in Birmingham, which Bud came over, and we just cried about, I don't know if he cried, but I cried a lot. But yeah, we sort of like the whole 2 years, going from getting silver medal the year before into a home Olympics. I then got blood poisoning and had to go to hospital and be on a drip for 3 days. Over the first 3 days, all I could do was tense my quads. That was my training. I set myself a training diary of tensing my quads and sort of static core, because I couldn't do anything else. They were like, if I flex my foot, I'll reopen the wound. So I just lay in a hospital bed, tensing my quads for a few days. I then arm biked for a week, which I swore I'd never do. I saw someone arm biking and went, that's tragic. I'd never be that dedicated. I want to arm bike. Then arm biked for a week. But yeah, basically massive load of training. I think I did a Diamond League in around 4:15 in my first race back. I had 4 weeks, around 4:15, 4:10, took a week off, and then had the Olympic heats around 4:05 to make the semi-final, and then 4:05 again in the semi-final, but didn't make the final. So it was, it was ridiculous. I don't know how I ran 4:05 off such a disrupted summer, but the most annoying thing was I ran 1:59 PB 2 weeks after the games. I think it was 1 week after the games, I ran a PB in the 8. Like, I literally just needed another 7-10 days, and I think I would have made that final. And then the final was Morgan Usain fell over, and it was won by a load of drug sheets. And I would have and it was 4:13. It was exactly my kind of race, like a sit and kick. Yeah, I would absolutely love to have had a go at that. And I think if Morgan hadn't fallen over, she would have beaten those girls, even though up to the eyeballs in EPO. So yeah, I would love to be in a part of that. But hey, but I got a silver medal at World Champs, and I came fourth the year after, so it could be worse.
Yeah. So it was a real success story, really, actually, given that circumstance to make the games.
Yeah.
And I guess we've got it's not going to be quite the same, but hopefully we host the European Cross Country Championships in Dublin, our home championship next December. What was a home championship like, even though it wasn't ideal circumstances for you?
It was amazing. I think so my husband didn't quite make it. He had a standard but didn't have a position at the trials. And one of my other training partners was the other way around. She'd won the trials but didn't have the time. So I had that sort of slap to my face that two of the people I was closest to didn't make it. And almost I did have the pressure taken off me, to be honest. I think, having gone through an injury and wondered whether I was even going to make it, I did go into it like total open eyes, like, I'm going to enjoy this. Now I finally made it. But it's bloody awesome, I think. And to do the Glasgow Commonwealth Games as well, even though I was English, like, they still got just that buzz to be a British crowd. And I think I was, totally gutted we weren't in Dublin this weekend for European Cross, because I've been lucky enough to start trying to do a bit behind the scenes with some of the championships and stuff like that. But I would always want to go and see a cross country in Dublin. I think that'll be a great atmosphere. Yeah,
it's something to look forward to in a year's time. Hopefully a big target for all of our athletes. I guess some of the other questions around, we can maybe focus on, I know it's getting late, I guess hopefully guys will stay with us, even with your horror stories from your Achilles injuries. But there's probably a few questions around focusing on some progression in some specific areas. So if we've done a little bit on your S&C as we've worked our way through, but if I can share screen, you might talk us through how you progress your S&C through your career.
So I thought I really think S&C was a huge part of middle distance running. I think it was integral for my speed, integral for robustness, running economy, or I really buy into that's a big part of middle distance running, and injury prevention. So I saw it as a big part of my program, and like I touched on it was in there twice a week from the age of 20. And then I would supplement that with circuits, like as and when I had enough energy in the week, I would supplement that with circuits as well. A big believer in Olympic lifts. I think the clean is done correctly and done with the correct training, correct coaching. I think the clean is one of the best exercises you can do out there. I did a lot of single leg exercises as well. So whether that be single leg RDL, step ups, what else can you do on a single leg? But I would think the single leg elements were really important for me. Sort of, again, I think robustness and the speed that I could get from both of those. If you can't tell, I really like it as well. It's one of my, you go slog around a muddy field and I'd much prefer, put me in a warm gym lifting, I'd much prefer that. So I should get really stuck into that. And something that was interesting for me that I learned through my career, George Gandy was the absolute opposite. He'd have his guys stop lifting the second they started their summer season. And I tried that in the NCA system, and I very quickly lost my strength and would very quickly lose my power, lose my speed, and pick up niggles. So I learned sort of by trial and error that it was important for me to maintain lifting through the year. I would go down to once a week on a race week, and I would tail off at the end of for championships. I would come off it for a couple of weeks. But any more than 2 weeks, my hips would drop, my knees would start to ache, things would go wrong in my chain, and it was much more important for me to lift. I think there's another thing out there that people it's quite a buzz thing at the moment, like whether you lift on your session days or on your easy days. And I think that's something I played around with a little bit and firmly settled on. I was better off lifting away from the track sessions. I felt I couldn't hammer the quality in a track session and hit a quality gym session the same day. I would always run first if I was to do that, because I think it's probably suicide to try and lift and then do a track session. But I couldn't get the quality out in the gym if I tried to do it on the same day as a big session. It was much better kept away. but I put a lot of work into rehab and core and drills alongside that as well. I think retirement's shown me that was very important, because I got very slow very quickly when I stopped doing that this year. Very, very unfit. But I think lifting is important if you want to be a good middle distance athlete. Maybe not before you get to college, and certainly not without coaching, without someone having an eye on you. But I think you see, this is stereotypical, but in Britain anyway, and in this group in Birmingham, see a lot of lads shy away from it. So, it makes me sore, I get DOMs, I don't want to do it. But I really think it's an integral part for middle distance. And you even see it in the longer distances at the moment. It's still serving people quite well.
Yeah, I think I guess it comes back to capacity as well. Like the amount of training we're doing, peak of your career, you need that robustness to be able to cope with that. So it's an investment in that as well. So yeah, that's good. And I think it's interesting, the debate versus to make your hard days hard and put the S&C on the same day or spread it up. I think we've seen you've been hosting the European Athletics lectures, and I think we've seen 2 S&C talks with opposing views on that. So
there's a big debate.
Individual discussion. Yeah.
I tried it. I tried lifting on the same days as sessions, and it exasperated every single niggle I'd ever had. And that was the other thing I'll say on conditioning. I was quite proud. I never had the same injury twice. I'd get my rehab. I'd understand why it was working. I'd do it, and then it meant there was a lot of layers and a lot of stuff to keep on top of. But I would only have the same injury once. Which I think, I don't know, that sounds a bit arrogant, but it wasn't. It was hard work. It wasn't luck that I didn't get the same injury twice. It's a lot of hard work.
And I guess you probably, like, something else that becomes clear that there was a progression with was your attitude to the sport from when you were, and your professionalism. Do you want to talk us through that, how that changed really across with different age groups? I think it's certainly changed. I touched on when I talked about my time, we had the first training diary up when I was 16. I enjoyed running. I enjoyed succeeding. I would win local races, and I'd place at national races. But it wasn't the biggest thing in my life. Social life probably was. It probably went social life, academics, ballet, then running. But I did enjoy it, and I continually amazed by the self-restraint Bud must have had at that age. But for me at that age, because he knew what he could give me, and he knew he could see a talent. That's why he put so much work into me, because he could see a talent in there, but he knew it wasn't right to push that at that moment. And all he would say the whole time I was at school and those first 2 years at college, the stress was to stay in the sport. I honestly, it was all he would say to me. It didn't matter how well or how badly the race had gone. All he would say is, if you stay in this sport, you'll be really good. And it was all about just staying. Yeah, he wouldn't even say, if you stay in the sport, you're going to go to the Olympics, or you've got to be a senior international, not a junior international. He wouldn't say that. He would just say, stay in the sport. And I think I was lucky. I'm sure he did a lot more guiding and nudging than I knew, because he would do it in a subconscious way. For me, it didn't feel very conscious, but he just nudged me along. And I think what made the difference was a slight professionalism in each environment I went in. And so I'd come up and train with you guys at Birmingham. I'd tap into the Oxford Uni group at home in Oxford. So I'd have that, that was maybe sort of 17, 18. I'd have that 1 or 2 days a fortnight that was a bit more professional, and then go back to sort of being a very big fish in a tiny club pond, and sort of go back to that environment. And I enjoyed going to university and almost sort of reinventing myself when I got there. You sort of get into that halls in first year and say, oh no, I'm a runner. And then, suddenly go, okay, maybe I am a little bit different. And you sort of gravitate. We had wonderful culture in the running club at Birmingham that wasn't elitist. That you come along and work hard, but no one really cared how good you were. It wasn't about being English school champion or having gone to World Juniors and that sort of thing. It was just like a nice, nurturing environment. I remember going home at Christmas and saying to my dad that I hadn't done a single run on my own, which was just the biggest difference from when I was in school. You're going out on my own.
yeah, just trudging up and down a boring road on my own, to going to university and running with someone every day. And I think that brought me on a level.
And I think going back to the guys going to college in Ireland, that's something, you know, we could have for free. There's enough athletes in all our key universities that guys could coordinate and get together and be running with someone.
Yeah.
And you twice a day. When did you bring in the double runs with that?
Double, I think, was probably second year university. I think we do a rogue double on a Saturday afternoon because all the older people were doing it. We just we go, yeah. And I think that college environment, so university college, that environment was just wonderful for like self-exploration as well. Like we'd sit there in halls debating training philosophy. We didn't know that's what we were doing. We were just talking about running because we loved it. But you end up finding your own way and figuring out what worked for you. Yeah, we were kind of half peer coached. You know, Bud would be there setting the sessions, but you're kind of figuring out your own way in between. And I think that was a great way to be like a student of the sport and learn it myself. Yeah, like I responded massively to that. And as you can see, you can almost see it in the training diaries. It's like, you know, I wanted to know what I was doing and I wanted to have control over that. And I got that in the environment in Birmingham. And I think that set me up to be able to cope with then another step up in professionalism in Florida. But I was massively, I'm a sheep. I just copy what people do around me. And I'm lucky that, yeah, that didn't lead me too much down students that wanted to go partying the whole time and more towards students that wanted to train hard. But it was very much like I got to Florida, I kind of looked around me and saw what the other athletes around me were doing and just copied that. And that sort of built up layers and layers of professionalism and dedication. So it always just felt very organic. I never felt like it wasn't comfortable in like the amount that I was giving to the sport. That was one of the nice things retiring as well. I was always like, oh yeah, like I've enjoyed every step of it. Like it's all been really, really fun. So it's good.
Yeah, and I guess I suppose we kind of touched on there. Bud was a coach who kind of, one of his philosophies was that, you know, a good coach makes themselves redundant, and I don't really think that's strictly speaking true, because I think as an athlete you always need that bit of guidance. But by sharing what the philosophy of the session was about and what you were trying to do, it got to a stage where Bud was missing for a session. You'd pretty much be able to predict what he was going to tell you to do. But you were saying you were coached by Bud, was your only coach, and I guess for those coaches out there, I guess maybe some tips on how that worked. And you were saying it probably wouldn't work for everybody, but there was probably reasons why it worked with Bud.
Well, he just gave me a really, really long leash, if there even was a leash. It's like, you know, there was massive freedom, and I was really encouraged to go and learn from different people. And I think that was really the first time I really knew that was when I went off to Florida. You know, he totally just said, do what you want. And then when I came back, and he came out to visit to watch regionals where you qualify for nationals. And I barely saw him because he was just talking to my coach and they were sharing ideas. And so I came back to Birmingham and we incorporated, right up until the end of my career, we were incorporating Coach Harvey's sessions from FSU into our program here. And he was just always learning. And it was a conversation every year, not 2011, 12 or 13, but it was a year every year of whether it was right for me to be coached by him. We would sit there, when you have a debrief at the end of the season, that would always be one of the questions. Like, is this right? Is this what I needed? So it was always sort of a willingness to look outside just the two of us or just our setting. And I think, honestly, the number of world-class coaches that he let me go and visit, steal stuff, come back and incorporate, I think are like absolutely why we succeeded. Yeah, because we were just stealing the best bit of everybody else's program, but we could only do that because he would let me go and join other groups, and then he would be open to it when I got back as well. That he would be constantly evolving what he's doing, and I sought that out in my S&C coach as well. I ended up with an S&C coach that allowed me to do that, a physio that allowed me to do that, because that's what I believed would bring sort of the best success.
Yeah, and that wouldn't work for anyone. Some people want to be told exactly what to do, and but it's worked for you. And I guess it's important for context. Probably when Bud started coaching you, he'd probably been coaching senior internationals from 800 meters through to big city marathon winners for 2 decades, probably at that stage. So some context. But yeah, I guess a couple of questions that come in during this evening. One was around, we touched on what you were doing, say, at 16. What were you doing as, I suppose, what we'd call a juvenile athlete in Ireland? Liam, between 11 and 15, were you running at all, or what were you doing?
I started at 11, just a bit of cross country. I'm really bad. I'm really awful coordination. Like, I wanted, my brother and sister are sort of cricket, basketball, football, all that. So I tried to do that, but I was really bad at it. So luckily, I found athletics and enjoyed that a lot more. But just general club athlete from 11, 12, 13. Did a lot of ballet and dance around that. So yeah, it's basically dance and athletics. With the athletics probably taking over when I was about 17 or 18. So I was young when Bud started coaching me, but my club coach retired, and I went on an Adidas camp that you were probably a staff on. Went on an Adidas camp and just sort of mentioned that my coach was retiring. And Bud, being the kind of guy, even though he was 2 hours, hour and a half down the road, started coaching me over email. So that was, yeah, so it was, and like I said, I wasn't doing a tremendous, at 14 I was probably only doing 1-2 sessions a week and 15 miles, something like that, 15-20 miles. We just started it really, really sort of casual like that. And like I said, I made English schools, like qualifying for that, which isn't easy, but I wasn't picking up medals or anything like that, sort of 14, 15 age.
And I suppose we've had athletes who've done well in the NCAA in the past. What was it, do you think, that made you transition from NCAA to winner to global medalist? Is the key things you think that were helped you make that transition, or was it just that was just your journey in your development age-wise?
I think I'm very lucky. I do. I think I made my own luck by being very thorough and being very meticulous, but generally, you can look at like the race where I won a silver medal, like 2 of the main people fell over, and I look at like Laura Muir, obviously the time she's run are phenomenal, that she's not got a world medal yet. So I think I ran a really freaking good race, and I put some good years off the back of that. I had a big breakthrough in 2008 and managed to capitalize on that, but I think it snowballed. When I look at my peers and my training partners as well, I think I had a lot of luck and just a lot of things going my way. And that's not very useful to anyone, is it? Get yourself some good luck.
No, I think what you've captured this evening, and you've given us a lot of time. I'm guessing people are getting ready for bed now. But I think you can see in the transition in the training diaries, the progression and the thoroughness, and building each year, adding something extra in, whether it was more runs, stepping up the gym program, stepping up the drills. There were more elements going in year on year, so that must have contributed to the transition as well. And one other thing I suppose around that is financially. You mentioned you were 21 really before you got. Well, it was actually when you returned, probably 22. You got some funding from UKA. You've been you're part of the On Camp with Kelly program where she was supporting some athletes, but it was only really at that age that you started to pick up funding. That was key, though, I guess. Once that NISU contract enabled you to help to transition into a senior athlete. Yeah, no, and it's the opportunities that opened up as well. Getting that funding at that age, that suddenly you can go on a training camp, you can afford to go on a training camp, you can afford to go anywhere you want in the world. I was really lucky. I made it to a high level without that to run. I had the scholarship in America, but I made it to sort of 4, 12 and 5th in the European under 23s off sports scholarship at uni. So that was free physio, and you could claim back hotel rooms if you needed to.
and then probably about £1,500 a year from On Camp with Kelly to put towards physio, physio, massage, training camps and that sort of. Or she used to say we could buy better meat. That's what she'd say a portion of it was for, doing a better supermarket shop. And that's, so I think I made it, like I say, to 5th in European under-23s off minimal support, and I think I maximised that environment and that support, and was just really lucky to have that extra layer sort of unlocked after NCAs.
Yeah. Well, I think we've touched on most of the questions I think we had. Let's let me check. Nutrition was the one we didn't touch on. So when you talk about thoroughness, how did we could share the slide, but maybe you as well to talk us through it. How did your nutrition and attention to that progress over your career?
It was not a massively big part of, sort of consciously a part of my life, probably until I finished that NCA year after that, and I sort of became aware that was a added level of performance. I was fairly lucky, like if I was running those miles, running 75, 80 miles, I was much more in the category of keeping the weight on, was a really big issue. I had to make sure I was eating enough, and so I'm very conscious to eat more, have more recovery shakes, always make sure I was getting enough fuel in. I had probably one blip second year university, I'd call it unconscious underfueling. As is probably evident, I'm a bit of an A-type female, that I'm very academically driven, like to do everything, like to keep moving the whole time. And I fell foul of that a bit in second year, that I just, lost a lot of weight really quickly. And luckily I had a close friend that, I can't swear, but she ratted me out to bud, and I got a firm talking to tip from her and some of the older girls. But that was sort of, I genuinely would say it was unconscious underfueling. But that sort of opened my eyes to how you need to be eating and making the right choices when you're training hard at university. I struggled with low iron as well as a teenager. I think that's a really, really common thing for teenage girls. So I remember I plummeted to about a ferritin score of 7 when I was about 16, 17, which is awful. Anyone that's been through that will know how rubbish you'd feel with a ferritin score of 7. So I always had to keep an eye on my iron, and I'd always take supplements for that. But I never got too much more complicated than that. Like I touched on, like my immune system was, I would lose a lot more days to colds than I would to injuries, and I had to really keep on. I was sort of very much 5 fruit and veg a day, like that. Absolutely, I know that's something maybe comes through a lot with people that have gone to college. They're sort of just continually picking up colds and stuff like that. Like my solution to that was absolutely as much fruit and veg as I could get in the day, and vitamin C to help with that. But not that scientific, which is quite a good side of being an endurance runner.
Yeah, and it was good to have teammates around you that spotted those issues. So I think we had some excellent questions come in, but in advance, and I think we've touched on all of those questions. I guess you maybe Bud's advice that to stay in the sport is maybe the answer. But one of the questions was, is there anything you'd use to invigorate a young athlete?
I think it's important to teach a young athlete the value of sport that isn't just PBs. I'm sure there's a more eloquent way of saying that, but I think in our sport it is so easy we're such a measurable sport. It is so easy to tie everything to times, and that I think 17, 18, I had a lot going on in my life and a lot going on in my body that meant I couldn't run PBs, or I wasn't going to run PBs. So I was very lucky that at that age, through my parents, through Bud, they instilled in me just a love of the process. That's what people call it nowadays. They didn't call it that when I was a kid, but falling in love with that process. And I think if you can encourage someone or educate someone to take personal value from training and just applying themselves, and take it away from times, whether that's times in training or times in races, that you just got a more sustainable environment. Because I think, yeah, if you can create a sustainable environment like that, where it's easy to feel good about yourself and it's easy to enjoy training, then you will just stay in it, and ultimately I think get better results than if you're if you're a slave to the watch. Lost.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great note to finish on, particularly on back, you know, with, I think particularly in this COVID time where we've not had the competition chance sometimes. I think that, you know, getting back to that love running and the process is a good note to finish. So a bit, we'll make this available to share if there's anyone you know that's missed it and I think will benefit.